And welcome to this week's episode of Visceral Reactions. I'm Matthew Jimenez.
I'm Quentin Williams.
And this week, there's something inside of us, and it might just be the devil again. But not in the same way as the first episode that we did on The Exorcist and God Told Me To. This time, the devil takes a couple of different forms, or evil takes different forms.
Mm-hmm.
But I think the scariest thing about both of these movies that we will discuss today, 1968's Rosemarys Baby and 1977's The Sentinel, is that the most terrifying thing is New York real estate.
I would also add that the scariest thing is women's choice and women's rights. Not that the idea of women's rights isn't scary, but the fact that they're being infringed upon very, very subtly and severely.
The main thing connecting both of these films, as you should see because it's very, very obvious, is the idea of a woman being alone in numerous ways, whether it's like physically being alone or being alone in a relationship. But regardless, this very isolatory, very paranoid, but justly justified paranoia in a New York apartment. And what's really incredible about both of these is that the idea of evil ends up becoming almost second in terms of what's most terrifying than to the everyday reality of women, I mean, to this day, but definitely during a moment, especially Rosemary's Baby coming out before Roe versus Wade in 1973.
Right, even right before the cusp of the really big feminist movement of the 70s.
Yeah. And so we see these two movies using the ideas of the Antichrist and of portals to hell, really just doing what all of these horror movies that we've been discussing have been doing. And that's just using them as these metaphors for these giant horrors that exist in just every day in our real world. And it gets to a point, especially in Rosemary's Baby, where you kind of forget that that the main threat is, the potential harboring of the Antichrist, and it's more of just fearing for Rosemary Woodhouse's condition, her physical well-being,
Her mental well-being,
her emotional state of mind, just all of these things. Like the two women that we're looking at this week really do not have an easy go of it.
No.
And what's absolutely fascinating is that in the end, both of them have to make a very difficult choice. And
honestly, though, and going back to the idea I mentioned about women's choice, they don't really have a choice. Not really. Not in the way that the film portrays it.
No, and it's this predicament that especially Rosemary's Baby is very conscious of. I guess we'll start there. We'll start with, especially since the Sentinel exists partly because of Rosemary's Baby.
Right.
We'll start with that. So yeah, Roman Polansky's film is an adaptation, of course, of Ira Levin's best-selling novel, which is a fantastic book. That was kind of a game changer for me to read years ago, because it led me to the realization that things could be entertaining and scary and also be really good. And that's not something because of just literary taste that like I'd encountered before. And so kind of in the way that like, I don't know, this is like this is jumping, but in the way that Rosemary's Baby kind of like opened the door for what horror movies could do in film. The book did that with literature for me. And so this book is coming out during a time when, I mean, this is going back to the same moment that we're talking about, or that we were talking about with The Exorcist. That like, and these are moments that are directly referenced in the film and in the novel. The Pope visiting Yankee Stadium, and Time magazine during the article, "Is God Dead?" So
yeah, both films are very interesting when it comes to religion, because religion takes a bigger part in the Sentinel. But in Rosemary's Baby, you have an almost progressive view of like the, I don't know if industrialization is the word, but like the almost, because they were kind of like ribbing on the Pope in Rosemary. It's so interesting to see this in 1968, more of a like progressive view of like, hey, religion's not, all that it's cracked up to be.
Yeah, I think you get the shift from the beginning of the decade, where the Vatican is creating all of these changes in the Catholic Church through Vatican II. I mean, to bring Catholicism somewhat into the 20th century, or at least closer to it than it was before. And between that and the election of John F. Kennedy to president, being the first Catholic president, you have this discussion around Catholicism in the early 60s that you didn't have for quite a while, and it mostly due to the visibility of Catholicism. And between these two things, and the Pope visiting Yankee Stadium, which is a bizarre thing to say, let alone to like see. And
Pope with a baseball cap,
yeah,
throwing the first pitch.
Yeah, exactly. You have religion being put on display in a way that makes it very easy to critique, and especially when Catholicism was already held as this institution to be skeptical of, which was, part of the reason why Kennedy's election was such a big deal in terms of our view of religion and politics, is because people were genuinely concerned that we were electing someone who answered to a higher power
More than the people.
Yeah, like, they were worried that the Pope was going to influence Kennedy on, domestic and foreign affairs. And obviously that didn't happen.
No.
And
Not even like remotely.
Yeah, and if it did, it obviously didn't go very well. But Rosemary's Baby is taking this and it's looking at this larger conversation of religion's place in the average American's life, and saying whether it does anything, whether it provides anything, whether it is even real. Because I mean, when it comes to Rosemary's Baby, definitely not so much with the Sentinel. You only have a representation of evil. You don't have anything to balance it out. There's no priest figure.
No.
There's no Father Karras. There's no Father Marin. There's no exorcism actually working. Like, we just have a coven of witches.
Yeah.
Who are very much having a physical, very tangible effect on the world around them.
Yeah, it's Rosemary versus almost the world.
Yeah, and that's something that that Ira Levin captured perfectly in the novel, and it's something that not just due to Polansky's intelligence as a filmmaker, but really interesting, his naivety as an American, like as an
A recent American.
yeah, that led to such a quote unquote faithful adaptation.
Yeah,
of the
he
novel.
wanted it to be as faithful as possible.
He also didn't know that he could change things. Because prior to Rosemary's Baby, he had only directed original material.
Mm-hmm. They were
And-
either Polish or French films.
yeah, and one was British, Repulsion,
Okay.
and Cul-de-sac, or so two were British, but this was the first time that he's taking someone else's work,
Mm-hmm.
and he was just under the impression that you had to do as much as possible in the script, and he did, and so that's why there's really anything that's changed from the novel to the film is not done to the detriment of the narrative.
Mm-hmm.
This weren't a horror-centric podcast, or if we were just looking at themes, really one of the perfect companion pieces to Rosemary's Baby is Repulsion, because it's another examination of a woman alone in a London apartment who's slowly losing her mind. I mean, in Polansky's first film, Knife in the Water, of having three people alone on a boat, in the middle of the ocean, or, Mediterranean, this idea of isolation, of having nowhere to go and nothing but your imagination running wild, and just all of your fears coming true, or just like at play.
Very much.
Yeah.
Like Rosemary.
Exactly.
And the interesting is that this sort of happens kind of towards the end of the film. There's been little hints and drops that become more prominent when she starts reading through the book, and like her mind starts wandering about, oh, now that makes sense why that happened and that happened. But besides that, I wouldn't, for like 3/3 of the film, 2 to 3/4 of the film, I wouldn't even describe the film as horror. It's like a very slow burn drama about this couple in a new place and just trying to have a baby.
I think that speaks to how the film is horror throughout the entirety of the picture, because the more that we see Rosemary questioning her reality and
The
seeing
people around her,
yeah.
doctor, her friends.
Yeah. And so
Even like before she read the book, she was like back and forth because
yeah.
everyone was telling her what to do, and she never got a word in edgewise.
Yeah, and that's what the horror of the narrative is that, as soon as Rosemary and her husband Guy move into this new apartment, and him as a struggling actor finds an opportunity by not selling his soul to the devil, but selling the soul of his firstborn. And that happens like it happens via the relationship, the friendship between them and their neighbors, the Castavets, Roman and Minnie, who are probably the worst neighbors in film history.
Alongside one of the worst husbands in film history.
Yeah, and yeah,
because the film doesn't really outright say it, but Guy's always been a terrible human being. Just with the power that he's given, quote unquote, that he's able to you actually are to see it. It's the idea of like power doesn't corrupt, power enables.
yeah,
So with the ability that Jack is able to have this wonderful, prominent career that he doesn't even think, should I sacrifice the well-being and future of my unborn child? Yes. Which this shows to go that no matter how caring guy seems to appear in the film, even though there's always like that weird layer of aggression about him, like all the time.
Yeah. Yeah, he's definitely not winning Husband of the Year award.
And I was rooting for him until the point early in the film where, you know, he drugs her. Yeah. Not even the rape, the Satan rape. It's that he said, we wanted to have the baby.
Yeah.
He even like admits it. I'm like, oh, that took your status of seeming like to be a genuinely caring guy with a bit of aggression down.
Yeah.
Because you date raped your wife.
Yeah. Yeah, that's...
Oh, not him, but covered up the Satan rape to say that you did.
But he's still, by partaking in this plot to provide an infant, or not even to provide an infant, to provide a vessel for the Antichrist.
Yep. Good old, it's always Antichrist.
Yeah, it's always the Antichrist. To the Castavetes, so that their coven of elderly witches who are, both spiritual and literal descendants of Adrian Mercado, who's a 19th century figure of witchcraft in the film, of having this tradition of trying to undermine any sort of authority, all sorts of institutions, not just religious, but like literally providing a way to bring about New World order. Mm-hmm. After the pregnancy is successful and it's the new year, Roman Castavet proclaims it year one. He says, here's to year one, not here's to 1966. Yeah. Which is the vision, I think, is equally terrifying, not just to the human decisions that are made, but to the religious battle that's coming. Is also terrifying, which makes Guy's decision to like partake in all of this like he's literally doing this so that he could get a lead role in a play. This not talking like I want to be the richest man in the world, or like
I just want to be.
He's like literally like I want to break. Yeah. Which says a lot about the acting scene.
As an actor myself, who has not gotten roles that I really wanted, I would never at a point stoop to like, you know what? Satanism, witchcraft, sacrificing my first. Yeah, I'll do that.
Yeah,
I'll do that.
Yeah.
I wonder if it is somewhat of a satirical view on maybe the Hollywood system that.
Oh, absolutely.
Polansky was very new to.
As a European filmmaker who is very much accustomed to and partially responsible for a lot of the creative freedoms that the 60s bring, going into the studio system, working with Paramount, I mean, he got really lucky to partner up with Robert Evans, but that system is completely different. I mean,
we were on the cusp of Hollywood changing.
Yeah.
The old, like, formulaic studio system was crumbling.
And even with that, when Rosemary's Baby comes out, like, those changes haven't, like, it's all right there in the moment. Like, everything, like, all of the films that came out that helped bring about that revolution, like, they're coming out when the movie's being made. Yeah. So, like, it doesn't have the chance to benefit necessarily from these new freedoms. Like, it has to push the envelope. Yeah,
because despite the film being rated R, I don't think there's that much or any severe sort of swearing. But there is nudity, but it's very brief.
Yeah. And it's...
This is, I think, right. It was either this year or next year when they really started pushing with the fucks and the shit.
Yeah.
That you haven't seen in film. It's around that point with the destruction of the Hays Code.
Yeah.
And this new shift toward Hollywood with the dismantling of the studio system, that you're really getting this new form of cinema. And you see that in Rosemary's Baby with, like, you know, the dream sequence. It's very European.
Yeah. I mean, it's the centerfold of the film, and it's the moment that highlights so much. Like it emphasizes both the human terror and the religious, because after Rosemary is is given a sleeping aid in her chocolate mousse.
Let's call it what it is. She was drugged.
Oh yeah. You know, she's under the impression that, you know, that her and Guy are gonna have this lovely evening, and then Minnie puts whatever concoction into her dessert, and Guy makes her eat it. And when she goes into this dream, which has a lot of imagery that doesn't necessarily
connect,
or really matter.
Yeah, like the yacht and stuff.
Yeah, like it's like
it's a dream.
Yeah,
dreams are like that.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And so like some of it is, you know, like the being alone on the boat is kind of like, you know, that's like Polansky's way of you know, addressing the isolation that Rosemary feels, like as she is being pushed into the direction of being the mother of the Antichrist.
Right.
And then you get the Kennedys on the boat, which, again, here's the Catholic element of like Rosemary as a lapsed Catholic.
I forgot about that.
You know, you've got the Kennedys. I mean, this is like, when this is made, like, Robert Kennedy is still alive.
Oh, only for
a little bit, you know, like he's assassinated the same year.
But
the
even
film comes
like
out.
the time period it's set in, which is 65, it's been 2 years since
the assassination, and so that's still very much. It's still obviously extremely fresh, and I'd like to go back to the Kennedy thing in a little bit, because I think it's really it's subtle, not subtle, and also really important. But, you know, and then in the dream, you know, Rosemary sees her neighbors chanting and drawing symbols on her and like red paint or blood, or, you know, and then
Kali Ma.
Yeah.
Kali Ma.
You know, and then, you know, it looks like Guy is mounting her, and then you know, it switches
to a feral beast that we don't get much. We don't really know what it is. We know it's feral looking and hairy.
Yeah, and then there's this really like you know, classic like Satan imagery, and so Rosemary realizes that, you know, she's being raped, and then she tries to defend herself, and then in this really, really powerful moment, she looks into the camera and jumps out of bed and says, "I'm not dreaming, this is happening." And at that point, everything that has happened to her, all of the suspicion that she has felt that things aren't necessarily right, and all of those suspicions that are going to be further validated, that's the moment where Polansky is putting you in the situation where you have to believe her.
Right.
And then if you have not believed her up to that point, then you are as complicit as everyone else in this plot against her, because you are doing to her what the institution of medicine, what the institution of government, what the institution of patriarchy have always done and continue to do to women, and that is not taking what they say or feel into consideration, believing them, you know, all of these things of like doctors, like not taking women seriously when they say that they're in pain,
right?
You know, or considering their status as like citizens, you know, in terms of like government stuff. Like, so like up to that point, the more that you doubt Rosemary, the more that in that moment you have to confront that you've been doubting her,
Right.
that you haven't been considering her as a person, like regardless of whether like this devilish plot actually exists, she thinks that there's something wrong, and that should be enough. And it's like that's what the film is doing, is saying like, regardless of whether something, you know, is Satan, doesn't mean that there's nothing wrong.
Right.
So with this dream, this idea of paranoia being justified, I think that makes the inclusion of the Kennedys even more important, not just for the film, but for like the decade as a whole. Because really, I mean, the Kennedy assassination is like the beginning of conspiracy theory being
prominent, out in the open.
And like, you know, a little bit more than just thinking of like, you know, a crackpot suggestion of like what happened, but like this is something with the most real of implications. Like here is the idea that government colluded.
The government is not on your side.
Yeah, you know, the idea of government and organized crime collusion to carry out the assassination of the leader of the free world. Like just the fact that there's like evidence that can even suggest that is absolutely bananas. And it's like what Polansky is doing by including the Kennedys is he's showing how the paranoia of government collusion, of government conspiracy, I should say, has put this veil over the entirety of the decade. And that even, you know, 4 or 5 years after the assassination, it's not even just there, it's getting worse.
Right.
And like Watergate hasn't even happened yet.
Like another 5 years?
Yeah. And so what the film is doing is that it's showing that the paranoia that the average American is experiencing in this moment is real.
Right.
That so many of your worst fears are actually happening. That like you could think the absolute worst thing that could happen to you, and instead of just going, oh no, that's just crazy, I'm just out of my mind,
you're just being hysterical, Rosemary.
Like what the film does is it shows how the individual in a moment like this, especially for a woman in a moment like this, is conditioned to take that hysteria, to take the hysteria, to take the paranoia,
right,
to take the emotional and physical and mental moments of crises and project it inward,
and masked all that, to not something actually happening, but effects and side effects of pregnancy. Yeah. And because right up to the point where Rosemary becomes pregnant, she's no longer treated as a human being.
No,
she's treated as just something to carry the baby. And it's very obvious when you have her husband, her friends, her doctor telling her what she should and should not be doing, even to the point of like those same people and her own friends from outside the apartment constantly telling her that you look terrible, you look awful, are you getting enough sleep, are you tired? You don't tell someone.
No.
Her identity has been stripped away into like nothing, and you can see every time it's brought up just the anguish, the brief anguish on her face that she's not
in control of herself.
Right.
And that's really,
it's the idea of choice and she not having it.
Yeah. And the time that this is coming out, abortion is not a federally protected right, that women have. But what's interesting is that the American Law Institute had these 3 conditions that gave a legal sanctioning for abortion. That if a woman was the victim of rape and was pregnant because of it, if the pregnancy was detrimental to the woman's health,
Right.
and if the fetus was at risk of being deformed. And what's fascinating is that Rosemary checks off all 3 boxes. And no one ever mentions her having an abortion except her.
Right.
And that moment when she's giving her, when she's throwing a party and she's crying in front of her best friends.
She's been in pain for months.
And, and they're telling her, like, there's something clearly wrong. You have to do something.
Interesting that it's the women her age who are making the most sense in telling her this is what you should do, which they're being very valid of it. Because they're listening to her.
Yeah. And it's the only time that someone actually, like, between her friends, which include Hutch, who later is victim to the coven, that she like cries out, like, I'm not going to have an abortion, or like, I don't want to have an abortion. Right. No one suggests it. Like, so it shows that, like, she's thinking of it. Her idea of choice, it's not even non-existent. It's like she knows that she could have an abortion, but it's not the thing that she thinks of solving the problem, because she wants to have a mother. And the laws around abortion at this time really were really catered to women in Rosemary's position. White, middle class, wanting a family, but there's just something wrong with the pregnancy. And so she's not going to get rid of the child, even when she knows that it's the Antichrist. Like,
yes, you're referring to the ending.
So that's something I guess we can circle back to. There's this idea that Rosemary is, instead of taking her fear and projecting it outward, all of the fear, actually, like all of the paranoia, is real, and she's internalizing it as not being real.
Right.
And the reality that speaks to for women, during this time, any time of not being able to find like a conduit, to like it, to feel better, like to take care of themselves, to be taken care of, and yet having a difficult time here. It's awful that when Rosemary does feel something, that you want her to not be feeling it, like, even when it's good, like when one of the really disturbing moments of when the baby kicks for the first time, and her reaction, because the pain goes away, and this is right after her and Guy have this argument, and
about her not wanting to see the doctor anymore, about her not wanting to listen to the neighbor friends.
Yeah, like she doesn't want to take this like terrible concoction drink from Minnie anymore.
She's worried it's hurting the baby and hurting herself.
Yeah, like she doesn't want to go see Dr. Saperstein anymore. Like none of this, and like this fetus, which is a parasite to her. This is not a symbiotic relationship here. Like she's not getting anything from it. And it's really, this is also coming out like at the same time that the disembodied fetus becomes a thing, like where pro-life organization started this like campaign of like looking at the fetus as its own thing,
Right.
completely removed from the mother, which makes it easier for people to have an emotional reaction to abortion as opposed to a scientific reaction to it. And Rosemary is pregnant also in a moment where technology is not the best friend to pregnant women when it comes to the medical field, because the whole idea that now you can see the fetus through ultrasound. Now this thing
has a face to it.
It has
almost.
a face, yeah. Like now you can see it. Like there's a certain.
It's not just almost like an idea. It's a tangible thing that you can. Oh, look, it's there.
Because I mean, before, like, how are you going to see a fetus? You can't until it's born. So it's like then it becomes a child,
right?
You know, but prior to that, it's just like this thing just growing inside you,
right?
But ultrasound suddenly takes that, and now it's like, oh, there's a heartbeat.
Was ultrasound around in the late 60s?
Yeah.
Okay.
It was the turn of the decade that it came about.
Okay.
So it's like all of these technologies, these ways of like mapping out childbirth,
right?
Like that, and like, oh, there's like also this like major breakthrough in terms of fetal positioning, of like understanding that the way that a fetus is, you know,
growing,
like how it's sitting, how that could lead to like deformity and stuff like that. So like she's having the Antichrist at like the worst time, basically. And the idea that her like bodily well-being is just being diminished for so long, and then suddenly it kicks, and then she starts going, it's alive. You know, it's her Frankenstein.
Yeah, I was thinking that too.
You know, it's alive, and suddenly she's happy, and like suddenly, you know, she's wearing yellow again, renovating the room for the baby,
the nursery.
Yeah, and all of this, and it's like suddenly things are back to normal, but they're not. In fact, they're worse, because now the Antichrist is even closer to being born. And the way that it critiques, like leading up to the birth and then after the birth, the way that the story critiques all these different opinions on childbirth is absolutely fascinating, because like midwives and this like collective like feminine community is, you know, is poked at with
when she's having the birth, like 15 people rush in.
Yeah,
like people we've hardly ever met. Like, what are you all doing here?
Yeah.
It's, of course, it's part of them being part of the witches' cult.
Coven, yeah.
But it's more like, oh, we're a community, we're family, we're gonna help. And I'm like, get out of here.
Yeah, you know, the way that like that Minnie provides all of you know, all of these like weird cake things and this weird shake, and then like one of the other neighbors, Laura Louise, you know, that they think that they know more about pregnancy
than the woman,
than the mother
doing the breaking it.
Yeah, both Dr. Saperstein, the Coven doctor, and Dr. Hill, Rosemary's original doctor, but equally complicit, because he has
whether he
moment,
knows or not.
Yeah, because I mean that's a moment where again credibility comes into it, and what a woman says that she's experiencing is not taken with as much
face value as it should be. It's swiped away.
Yeah.
Because
all for the sake of
a woman.
Yeah.
What does she know?
And also Dr. Saperstein is a doctor that literally everyone in the movie
says
knows.
Great. He's great.
Yeah. And so he has
an authoritative
he has a certain gravitas,
edge,
yeah,
than Rosemary.
exactly.
They're gonna, of course, listen to the quote unquote professional,
yeah,
more than
the mother.
The mother who's having a genuine crisis, but she's shouting at deaf ears.
Yeah, and of course, like this is a moment where, you know, mental health is still not nowhere close to being taken as seriously as it should. I mean, we haven't even gotten to One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest coming out. Like, this is, you know, this is a situation where a woman is saying that her doctor, her husband, her neighbors, and everyone else that she knows are trying to take her baby. That naturally, what a doctor is going to do is he's going to hear this,
right,
and he's going to contact his highly esteemed colleague and tell him,
and first of kin.
Yeah, and tell them that, like, you need to handle this.
You need to come down and get her because he's acting hysterical.
Exactly. And so you have all of these instances of Rosemary as a mother being the last one considered when thinking of the child. Like, regardless,
it's no longer, it's her C-second fiddle. It's no longer about her, the actual person giving life to this human being. The baby's more important.
Yeah.
Again, it's that continuous banging on the head idea about women's choice.
Yeah. And by putting it in a horror narrative, you can get away with that in a way that you
couldn't in like a drama.
Yeah. You know, at least not in a way that wouldn't make the audience feel that they're watching like a PSA.
Because it's almost these type of like messages that certain horror movies evoke. They're almost subliminal because it's not in your face. It's very subtle, and it's almost at the back of your mind, like you're going out of the movie theater thinking, "Wow, that was a great horror movie," and you're thinking, "Wait, what's this bubble thought forming in the back of my mind?" Oh, that's what they were talking about.
That's what this was about. Yeah, how the film just gets this across to you without it being overbearing, where by it just actually like doing the opposite, like making it seem as terrifying as it really is. And I mean, when she has the child, she doesn't experience it.
She blacks out.
You know, because they drug her. You know, a couple of decades prior to Rosemary's Baby coming out, you have for the first time this procedure of quote unquote the painless childbirth.
Cesarean section?
No, like a natural, but like a drugged. Like, this is the beginning of like the anesthetized childbirth.
Oh, okay, I know what you're talking about now. Okay.
It developed in Germany, I think, in like the 20s, and like women from all over would go, and really they would just get drugged, and they would wake up, and there would be a baby. And what's really, this is the modernization of childbirth and of pregnancy that results in this rift between mother and child,
right?
Which is really unfortunate and awful for both parties, because there's this level of, what is it, like oxytocin,
right?
That's released when a woman gives birth and then like sees the child for the first time, and like that connection makes for a much stronger relationship, because like there's this instant like happiness.
Yeah, and that maternal.
Yeah, the bond is like
instant.
Yeah. And so like, you know, but if the woman's drugged and they don't remember, you know, they're physically, you know, they're just blacking out.
They're groggy.
They're not going to have
haze,
that.
Yeah.
Yeah, and also like like as soon as the baby's born, like nurses immediately take the child away, and then like, you know, the woman has to ask like, where's my child? Like, where's my baby? You know, and that's what happens to Rosemary.
Yep.
Like, she doesn't remember it. She has no idea. And then Saperstein and Guy tell her that the child died. Meanwhile, the child is next door in care of the Castevets and the rest of the coven. And she has to walk into this apartment after hearing a baby crying.
Right.
Equipped with this very long knife.
Yes. Before, with one of the coven members, I'm saying sarcastically this, very subtly, wink, wink, notifying that the baby's alive by like, oh no, don't put the milk. Like, good job. You very much kept your cool.
Yeah. And then we get one of the great moments of Rosemary seeing her child.
That expression that she gives
timeless.
Is like ingrained in my mind, just wide-eyed, hand-covered. It very much invokes what most of Shelley Duvall's character in The Shining will be, just bug-eyed and terrified all the time.
Yeah, and thankfully, we never see the infant.
No.
Which is one of the best decisions that the film makes.
In comparison to one of the worst decisions that, in my opinion, the film makes, which is Rosemary going up to the crib and rocking it.
This leads to something that the first time I watched it, I was in high school.
Mm-hmm. This was my first time watching it, by the way.
You know, then this is like a decade prior to reading the book, and I asked my mom, you know, who was 17, 18 when the movie came out.
Right.
I asked her how could someone knowingly, consciously raise the Antichrist? Like, how could you, like, if you knew that your child was the spawn of Satan and yourself, like, how could you do that? And like this is something that's just stuck with me for so long. My mom just really simply just said, when you're a mother, you just care for your child.
And I understand that. I do. That makes perfect sense. But in the back of my mind, I'm like, even at the very end, you took her choice away.
I don't know if it necessarily does. Because, I mean, she doesn't have to be the mother.
I guess that's true.
You know, obviously, Roman pressures her, you know, by saying, like, you know, no one can care for her the way that you could, you know, like, you can't abandon your child.
No, she could.
but she can, yeah. Right. It's like, you know,
I don't know. Maybe it's just because the film had knocked her down so many times.
Yeah.
As morbid as this sounds, in the back of my mind, I'm thinking, stab the baby.
Yeah. No, but see, that's exactly...
Stab the baby. I don't care. It's the Antichrist. I wouldn't feel any remorse.
You know, I think this especially is where the film is showing that the maternal bond, maternal connection.
I guess that's true.
That a woman has with her child, like, that's like the strongest thing in the universe. Like, even having the Antichrist cannot stop you, because it's not the child's fault.
No, it's not his fault.
It's really, I mean, she's really, it's like, it's not even a question of this being the Antichrist. Like, this is just what I would imagine, you know, a lot of people feel when there are children born from, like, sexual assault. Like, it's not the child's fault. Like, it didn't ask for this, but it was born. And so Rosemary does what she always, what she was planning on doing, what she had wanted to do.
Have a baby.
Which is have a baby and take care of it. Now,
what happens after that?
Well, Ira Levin wrote a...
Yes, I wanted to talk about that.
Yeah.
But just, I don't know, as sweet as that is, it does make the ending a bit bleak, if I may be so bold into saying, because it's like, well, there goes the world.
Yeah.
In 20 years, the Antichrist is going to rise up.
Baby Adrian's just going to ruin everything.
Yeah, so there was a sequel written.
Yes.
And I
never filmed.
Yes, I read the Wikipedia synopsis for it.
Yeah.
And it's, I don't like it. So, brief summary, Rosemary wakes up from like a decades-long coma, and it's the future, and her son is he's a successful businessman, and he's helping the world. He's like, he knew he's the Antichrist. He forego his destiny to bathe the earth in hellfire. He's a good man, and he's saving the world with his wealth. And then there's a product he's releasing or something that there's a virus connected to it, and he didn't know that until like the very last minute. And like the virus is released and it kills everyone. And then Rosemary wakes up, and it was from a dream. The whole story was her waking up from a dream, and she wakes up days before they go to the apartment where the film takes place. So all the film, I guess technically the first book and the sequel, it was all a dream. That's kind of stupid. It's the implication like, oh, is she going to use that knowledge to prevent it?
Yeah.
But it was all a dream. It's that number one thing in writing where you're not supposed to do. Now, it's a cop-out.
Yeah, and unfortunately for like contemporary readers, like that came out before like that was
the
a
big
cliche.
no-no. Yeah.
So I'm sure, like in the late 70s when Levin wrote it.
Yeah.
Like that's not, it hasn't been done to death or even done to the point of being like the worst cop-out you could possibly have.
Yep.
So, but still, it is cheap.
It is.
It's cheap because regardless
it's
of...
like creatively bankrupt.
It's one thing if like the sequel ends and she's still pregnant, and it's like, if you have this child, this is what's going to happen.
Even still, it's the same thing, and
like that to me would be like less egregious
than having to
like
reset
having
everything.
The whole
right.
narrative is now yet to happen, and you're like, wait, you mean if Rosemary just doesn't sign the lease on this apartment, everything will be fine?
She just says bye-bye to Guy.
Yeah.
No Antichrist.
Yeah.
Well, maybe it's very possible that, what was Tori? What's her name? I forget. The one who had to...
Oh, yeah.
It's possible that she may have become what Rosemary would have.
Which is what was going to happen. So that's another one of the realities that that the film is speaking to in terms of, the experience of being a young, potentially pregnant woman, is that the young girl that the Castavets taken, I think it was Tori.
I think her name starts with a T. I don't remember.
It was Terry. It was
Terry.
Yeah.
Terry.
That her suicide, it shows how you do have a choice, but but the options suck. That it's like, Terry finds out somehow I think she like overhears somehow, like she gets the idea that the Castavets are trying to use her as a vessel. And so instead of going through with that, instead of being pregnant with the Antichrist, she decides to kill herself.
Right.
And suicide, infanticide, abortion, all of these things in literature, in like just society, like in just like cultural thinking, like all of these are things that are historically directly connected to young women who were sexually active.
Right.
So Terry, choosing suicide is a way of showing one of the realities. Like Rosemary at some point could have contemplated it, but she chooses to. So it's like, you can kill yourself, you can kill the infant,
Baby.
or you can have it and be societally damned.
For most of the podcast, we do talk about very important things. We do have to have an air of fun and humor to it. But this, unfortunately, brings it down nuts, but it has to be talked about because it's that idea of choice, and that young girl did not have a choice.
No, it doesn't make it easy to watch something when you know
Right.
what has happened. And it's always weird when it's like, okay, well, like this came out before that, so like should I watch this
Now,
more
right,
or less?
should I not watch
like,
anything else? It's,
yeah, you know,
it's that idea of separating artist from the art,
Yeah.
which is very difficult to do.
you know, especially given the subject matter of Rosemary's Baby, there's this really, really unfortunate irony that has attached itself to the narrative of Polansky's life. After the Manson murders on Cielo Drive, Polansky was a suspect,
Right.
of killing his own wife and unborn child.
Mm-hmm.
And one of the things that people said was that only a person who had directed something like Rosemary's Baby could have done this. You know, there were people who were so disturbed by it that they said that only a person in commune with the devil could have made something like that. And so you have this, before his sexual assault ever happens, you already have this satanic imagery,
Right.
directly associated, whether he is the product of it or the victim of it.
Mm-hmm.
It's like the devil and Polansky have this very disturbing and unfortunate relationship. By the time he does what he does and flees the country, I honestly don't know if there's anything left to say, because I don't know what there is to do.
In comparison, absorbing all the sort of Harry Potter memorabilia and media, because
Yeah.
J.K. Rowling is
Not
anti-trans.
great.
Yes.
Yeah.
But for Roman Polansky, he's old and he doesn't do movies often. So it's like,
But he still makes them, and he typically makes his films in France, and in France he has a good
right.
reception for the most part, but there are still very public critics of him in France,
Mm-hmm.
or in Switzerland. It's like, what do you do? Because like he did, he was put on trial and he was found guilty, and
the judge was slightly psychotic, and like he desperately wanted him to put him behind bars forever.
yeah.
Valid.
And it's like there's like this alternate universe where like if he gets a judge who's not hell bent on punishing him,
Uh-huh.
but instead
Giving him
is
his-
serving justice
right.
for the 13-year-old girl,
Mm-hmm.
then maybe he doesn't think, oh, if I don't leave, my life is over.
Right.
Maybe he's like, okay, I'll like be in jail for a few years, or maybe I'll get my sentence lightened because like, he's one of the biggest names in Hollywood and he has money and he could like get a like sentence like, like commuted or something. But instead he's faced with the decision of run or,
Which just heightens the awfulness of the crime.
Yeah.
Because, you go to prison. I mean, it's supposed to be a place to reform.
rehabilitation. Yeah.
Not exactly
Yeah.
to the end of day standards, but, I guess the blow would be softened a bit if you knew he paid for his crimes.
Yeah.
But it's the fact that he ran, and there's been other allegations that have surfaced throughout the years that it's just an unpleasant thing all around.
It is. It is. Even his relationship with with the girl involved. It's like, like she has apologized to him, but like it doesn't.
When she didn't need to, more as she forgave.
Yeah, and it's like it's something that doesn't erase what happened, but it's like, okay, if she forgives, like, does that mean everyone else can like move on, or
Just
like
a weird gray area.
It's like what but really, I think like you said, I think his running and not serving time is like, it's like a message that says that he won't accept what he did.
Right.
And it's like, because of that, even if she accepted what happened, it's like no one else can move on because like justice was never really was never served. and it's shitty, and like this caused I mean, this always causes controversy, but like when The Pianist came out, it's like, what do you
do? Like, yeah, the man makes fantastic films, but he's also a monster.
Yeah, and it's difficult, and I think, I guess, tying this back to the film, there is rarely a time in life where there are decisions that are easy to make,
or right or wrong.
Yeah, like
sometimes the world's just gray.
Just gray, yeah.
And as much as we would love there to be a concrete good, bad,
we almost never get that. I mean, it's not easy.
Hardly ever in like horror films.
Yeah, no, there's always some sort of compromise. So like at the end, if Rosemary kills the child, she has killed her child. No matter
if at that moment the child is Satan's incarnate or not.
Exactly. Like because that will always have to be the justification, but the first thought will always be, I killed my own child. And that's something that clearly Rosemary could not.
And struggle with. All the while, guys like, just make another.
Yeah.
Just start making another one.
Uh-huh. And it's really, there's no, regardless of what happens at the end, it's not easy.
Right.
And it's not, these difficult choices are part of what make not just these films, but like any narrative worth discussing, because it puts us in the position of, well, what would we do? What do we think we would do? What exactly is right? Like, is it right because it happened in this moment in time?
Is it right because it's the closest thing to good that can be achieved, even though the outcome isn't all good?
Yeah. And that is the predicament that Allison.
Yes, we've been talking for almost the entire length of the Sentinels. Let's actually talk about the Sentinel.
Yeah. So 1977's The Sentinel, directed by Michael Winner, who did the first 3 Death Wish movies.
Yes, he did. An interesting switch of genre.
Yeah.
Not many people can pull it off.
Yeah, and yet Michael Winner, big fan of the revenge thriller, the political thriller.
Big fan of Charles Bronson.
Yeah, big fan of Charles Bronson. Maybe the biggest Charles Bronson fan.
Mm-hmm.
But The Sentinel, we find Christina Rains.
Yes, let me just pull up real quick.
The cast? I have the cast written down.
The absurd.
It's ridiculous.
And crazy. It's a good thing we're going straight into the Sentinel so we can tone things down and have a little fun. Because
this is... So let's go through...
Say them loud and clear so no one's missing anything.
Yes. So these are people who were paid to be in the Sentinel.
For a very low, the film was only what, $4 million?
Yeah. The budget is absurdly low considering the amount of people who are in
known
this.
And unknown at the time.
So we have Christina Rains, Chris Sarandon as her boyfriend.
Yes. Say what these stars have gone on to do. So to give more context, because some people have a bad time with names and faces.
Okay. So Chris Sarandon would later be the voice of Jack Skellington.
Yes.
In The Nightmare Before Christmas. And Chris Sarandon also famously provided his voice in Dog Day Afternoon just 2 years prior as Al Pacino's lover, who is needing money for a sex change operation.
And he also played Prince Humperdinck in The Princess Bride.
Yes. Then we've got Martin Balsam, who famously was stabbed and fell down the stairs backwards in Psycho, which we will be talking about next episode.
Another
one of the great character actors.
Another what's the 12 Angry Men cast on the show.
Yep. Then we've got John Carradine of the Carradine family.
A good. The less said about David Carradine, the better.
Yeah. Then we've got Jose Ferrer, Oscar-winning Jose Ferrer, who in 1950 won Best Actor for playing Cyrano de Bergerac, and is the father of also actor Mel Ferrer, who you might remember as the bad guy in Blank Check.
Man.
Then we've got Ava Gardner.
Another great
classic
icon
Hollywood.
of old Hollywood. There's a lot of old Hollywood icons in this.
We've got Arthur Kennedy, 5-time Oscar nominee.
Damn.
Burgess Meredith, who the same year as this movie decided to coach Rocky.
Yeah, so he was in Rocky. He also lent his voice in the G.I. Joe animated show, I believe. But more importantly, he
the
played
Twilight Zone.
the Penguin in the 1966 Batman show starring Adam West, which I know him the most from.
We've got Eli Wallach, who just a decade prior to this was in the Man with No Name trilogy. I mean, in the 50s, he's doing movie adaptations of Tennessee Williams. He would eventually... he worked forever. Yeah, Eli Wallach was in the third Godfather. Then we've got a brief moment of having Jerry Orbach, like 2 decades prior to Law and Order. Then we have a very brief moment of Christopher Walken,
who has lines.
He has lines.
Was this before or after Deer
Before,
Hunter?
the year before.
Okay.
And then as a very oddly aerobic clad lesbian couple, we have Sylvia Miles and Beverly D'Angelo. And then we have cameos by Jeff Goldblum.
Yeah, before the Goldblumisms took over, and he interesting enough, he also had a little cameo in the first Death Wish. I guess the director loved him so much they brought him back. He has some lines.
Who doesn't love
Jeff Goldblum? This is before I would say he went very big in The Fly. Maybe it was his first big break.
As far as Jeff Goldblum, yeah, as far as like leads,
yeah.
I mean, he'd done like romantic comedy types. Yeah, interestingly enough, 1977, the same year that both Jeff Goldblum and Christopher Walken have speaking roles / cameos in Annie Hall.
Yep.
Which is bizarre that like both of them are, just shows like they're trying to come up at the same time.
Yep. Hey, are you going to mention the Blink and You Miss
absolutely.
cameo?
Before I mention that one, which is the most insane, at the very end of the film, we see a very young Tom Berenger, years before he would terrorize his troops in Platoon. And then in the very beginning of the film, don't fucking blink because you're going to miss him. And
make sure to pause in slow-mo.
Yes.
Your TV
because
remote.
you have to. It literally credited as Man on Street.
Yes.
Richard Dreyfuss.
Now, Richard Dreyfuss at this point was not unknown.
Far from it.
He had done Jaws. And
2 years prior. The next year, after this movie, he wins an Oscar for The Goodbye Girl.
And he had also... When did Close Encounters come out?
The same year.
Okay, so even
people
with
know
Jaws...
He's a leading man.
Richard Dreyfuss is not...
He is not Man on Street. He is not Man on Street.
Just the most... Out of every actor in this film, Richard Dreyfuss is the most wasted.
1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10.
They wasted him.
15 names listed prior.
Utterly wasted.
To Richard Dreyfuss. And there he is.
I bet the cover copy was really good that they gave him.
I like to think that he was just on set next door, and I don't know, he was probably friends with like Jeff Goldblum or something.
Who knows?
And he was like, "Hey, one of the extras didn't show up. Can you be Man on Street?" And Richard Dreyfuss is like, "Yeah, of course.
I am the man on the street.
I am Man on Street.
You need me to do an autopsy on a shark?
Yeah, I got a boat." Where would this episode be without another reference to The Exorcist?
I was hoping that we could avoid it at all costs.
We can't.
It's okay. It's the most minute, more minute than the Lost Boys with Jason Miller's son. But this one's even more. It's like third degree. How many degrees of exorcism are you?
Now, the makeup work in this is fantastic.
Yes.
And if you wonder why it's so fantastic, it's because half of the makeup credit goes to Dick Smith.
He's
You're
back.
like, where does Dick Smith sound familiar? Why is that name? Where have we seen that name before? Oh, I don't know. Maybe the guy who won the, the guy who did
Won the Academy Award for Best Makeup on The Exorcist.
And you're
maybe?
like, yeah.
I swear, if every episode of this season
we mention it
at least once,
yeah,
then is the podcast cursed? Or are we just really good at our jobs?
More than likely the first one, but I'm going to hope it's the second one too.
We're going to have someone bless the studio.
Yeah, we're going to need a young priest and an old priest. You can't escape it. So the Sentinel, now usually the second movie that we do is kind of lesser known, but
I feel like this
Sentinel
one would be, I guess, compared to others,
definitely the most well-known
right.
second feature that we're doing. But the Sentinel really, it had a good reception.
Mm-hmm.
It's not low budget. It
kind of is, but the way it's filmed,
it's not God told me to.
No, it very much invokes competency and even though there's a bit of competency in Larry Cohen sometimes, it has this confidence of a big, not like a massive Lawrence of Arabia type film, but it knows what it's doing. It has a good team behind it.
You can tell that the two strains of influence that this is taking from the satanic, or I should say the religious horror of
Yet again,
Rosemary's Baby and The Exorcist.
We can't escape it. We can't escape exorcism. We can't escape religion in our horror films.
It's taking that, and then it's also taking the political thriller of the 70s, which political thrillers are no better than in the 70s, and
while also being a subtle satire of, like Rosemary's Baby, women and women's rights and women's choice, which I know I mentioned briefly, but we'll be able to get more into context in the film.
Yeah, all of these things are coming together to tell the story of a woman who is trying to create a space for herself where she can exist on her own.
It's kind of like a safe space to, I guess, not remind herself, but just, show that I'm
an individual.
Yeah.
Yeah. Her boyfriend, Chris Sarandon's character, Michael, not a bad guy, but he really wants to marry her.
Right.
He doesn't understand why she won't move in with him, why they won't get married. They've been together for 2 years. Everything's fine. But prior to Allison being in Michael's life,
he was married.
He was married to a woman who killed herself.
Yeah.
And as we learn very early in the film, Allison also attempted suicide.
Mm-hmm.
And so there's this very difficult connection and connotation to being with Michael that she's not ready to fully accept yet.
Yeah, she loves him. She's not
ready. Yeah.
And valid, and Michael, if he is a good boyfriend, should understand that.
Yeah.
But it's never what the woman wants. It's never listening and hearing out what the woman has to say. It's always the man knows best and the woman is not.
Her mental health is not put at the forefront.
Oh. At the beginning of the film, her mental health is pretty okay.
Yeah.
Until
she moves into...
I would say even before. When she has to deal with her dead father, who was abusive toward her.
Yeah. And
because he died, and she went to the funeral, and she had a flashback of this really weird escapade that he's having with these women, and he's like, ah,
and beats her. Yeah. And this weird recreation of the Noah moment where who is it? Was it Ham? Curse of Shem. Noah's son, who was castigated because he witnessed Noah being drunk and naked, and so he's like, "You can't see me looking like this." Yeah, it was one of Noah's sons, and so Allison, when she's a teenager, she walks in on her father in bed with 2 prostitutes.
Yes,
maybe.
Who knows?
Yeah, who knows what they are? 2 women who are clearly not her mother.
Not supposed to be there.
Yeah. And because of being caught, her father beats her. And her response for being so emotionally distraught is she takes a razor blade to her wrist. And so her mental health has always
Been
shaky.
Yeah, been not in question, but been
A concern.
a concern.
Yeah, since then. And so it's something that she is clearly. Oh, also she's a model and a very successful model.
More similarities to Rosemary's Baby
Yeah.
and Guy being an actor, being in commercials and
Yeah.
stuff. So is Allison.
Almost the same line of like, oh, what have I seen you in?
Yeah.
Being a big thing.
And she's marginally successful, I would
Yeah,
say.
she's on like magazine covers.
She gets work.
Yeah, she's in commercials. Yeah, like Ava Gardner, the real estate agent. She asks her, "Oh, like what have I seen you in?" And she recites a line from her like hair commercial.
Yeah.
And she's like, "Yeah, okay, I know." She ends up in this Brooklyn Heights apartment where the only other person who lives there
Is a priest.
is a blind priest.
Yeah, who's looking out the window.
At the top, you know, Ava Gardner tells her, "Aren't you used to people staring at you?" Like, you know, but he's blind, so he's not staring at anything. And you're like, oh, okay. But then Burgess Meredith's character.
I don't remember. He's very charming.
Yeah.
He's a bit eccentric.
Yeah, he's got a black and white cat
And
a bird.
A canary.
Yeah, and on him at all times.
Yep.
And old man lives by himself. And then there's the Sylvia Miles and Beverly D'Angelo, odd lesbian couple who are very...
Not odd that they're lesbians, but they're just odd themselves.
They're like, yeah.
The younger woman just starts touching herself in front of Allison.
And never says a word.
Nope. And she's, with all rights, you know, not having him. She's like,
Yeah.
I have to go.
Yeah, she just wanted to stop in to meet the neighbors, and next thing you know, she's getting this like
show.
Yeah, she's getting a peep show, and so there's this weird plot.
I wouldn't call it. I mean, towards the end, but really, it's interesting, and it's just like Rosemary Baby, a very nice slow burn. I love a slow burn horror.
I'm sorry, I don't mean the plot as in like the plot itself is weird, like it's like a unusual. But I mean like the plot against Allison.
And there's almost two, and you're unsure like
which one's
yes.
Yeah, who do you root for?
Yeah.
Yeah, because you find out between this opening little scene in northern Italy,
That's the first scene, interestingly enough.
Much in the way that The Exorcist opens in northern Iraq.
Yep.
We get a
cabal of priests and bishops
and archbishops, cardinals, like whoever, like Vatican folk.
Yep.
You know, doing weird like cabal things. And
I mean, they're just talking.
Yeah.
That talking can be weird sometimes.
Well, I mean, they're in like the middle of the mountains.
That's fine.
Yeah. We find out after all of these like weird neighbor moments.
She attends a weird party with all the neighbors, and she dances. She has a wonderful time, and then she wakes up and she hears like knocking coming up above the stair, above her apartment, and she's like, there's not supposed to be anyone up there.
Yeah.
And then she goes to the real estate agent, Ava Gardner. She asks about it.
And she's like, nobody lives in that apartment above you. And she's like, that can't be possible.
And also, no one lives in the apartment but you and the priest.
Yeah. And she's like, but I just went to a party. And she's like...
I went to their apartments. I saw a furnace. So she takes her on a tour, and it's all disheveled, broken. No one's been...
Old.
No one's been in there for decades. Not decades, but
a long
time.
Enough for like cobwebs and stuff to form. You get the same experiences with Rosemary's Baby. You're like, wait, but everything you experienced like seemed so real.
Mm-hmm. Like even the boyfriend like touched a photograph that Ghost Burgess Meredith left in her apartment.
Like it's like she's not like, you know that she's not crazy, but you don't know what's going on.
They act very much as like the ghosts in the first season of American Horror Story. Just like stupidly powerful for them to just interact with people. They can pop
up and
like talk to people for the living like they're there.
And so eventually Allison sees this like old, decaying, rotting version of her father. And
Because she in the next night
hears a
she hears the bumping and stuff.
Yeah.
So she investigates
with a knife,
takes a knife,
and then she just stabs at her father, body ghost, and then she tells the police.
She runs out of the apartment screaming.
Yeah.
The people in the other buildings come out of their apartment buildings and rush to her on the street.
And they're like, well,
what happened?
Yeah. And so, there's an investigation.
With good old Chrissy Walken.
You got Christopher Walken and you got Eli Wallach investigating, and they're like, well, we got a murder weapon, we got blood, we got a person who says that they stabbed someone, but we don't have a body.
Right.
So what's going on?
They start very much being suspicious of her.
Yeah. And they're also suspicious of her boyfriend because he's a hotshot lawyer. And there was apparently controversy around the suicide of his wife. And apparently the cops suspected foul play, but they couldn't make anything stick. And so, Eli Wallach's character is like, I got it out for you, kid, and like,
both of you.
Yeah.
And police captain or whoever's like, hey, you guys don't have evidence. Drop it.
Yeah, like, stop it. Like, you're being a hardo about this. And what we find out is happening because we get news that all of the people that Allison says that she was with in that party are actually murderers who were all dead.
Yeah. It's interesting in the back of my mind watching it because Burgess Meredith's character, very like flamboyant and eccentric. He very much reminds me of you probably haven't seen the show yet. It's on Hulu. It's Only Murders in the Building.
No, I haven't watched it yet.
It has Selena Gomez, Steve Martin, and Martin Short. Martin Short's character very much kind of like a flamboyant, because he's a down on his luck, washed out theater director. He used to be big, but not anymore. And he just has this like flamboyancy about him. And Burgess Meredith looks a lot like Martin Short, how he does in the show. And it's just funny that like
that's a thing.
Not that probably the Sentinel has no bearing on Only Murders in the Building, but it's funny that they have these two similar characters, and Burgess Meredith is a ghost in a building where there's only murderers.
Yeah.
It's just a fun little thing in my head that I was thinking of.
There's no idea as to like why this is happening. Like, why are these people like here? Why is she appearing to
Clearly
them?
They're ghosts, but we're like, why ghosts? Well, I was expecting a religious horror, not House on Haunted Hill. What is happening?
Like, why murder ghosts?
Why
appeared to Allison? She's fragile.
She do her best.
Yeah. And so we get more information by Michael, and
because he's like, Michael's weird because like throughout the film he feels very distant and not caring, but he does care because he's like going out of his way to find out.
He commits a crime.
First of all, what's happening to his girlfriend, what's happening in the building. He's like the only one who listens.
Yeah. And he cares enough, he listens enough to the point where we have, a very much like a hotshot lawyer.
Yep.
A high profile lawyer committing a crime.
To break into like a church sanctioned building to steal some documents.
Because he finds out that the building is owned by the church, by one of the dioceses. And he looks into it, and the diocese is very shady about owning the building.
He's been appearing throughout the film, like talking to the old priest, but the characters don't know, but we as the audience know. He talks to Allison in a church when she's having like
Arthur Kennedy.
Yeah, just a regular, maybe not crisis, both a crisis of faith and a crisis of herself. He has
Franchino. Father Franchino?
I think
was
you have the names more down packed in these two films than I do.
I think it was Father Franchino.
And so he also speaks to Michael, and he's like, you can't have these documents, which makes him break into the building. And what does he discover?
He discovers that there is a person assigned to this building over centuries, it seems.
Well, it's been going on
for a while.
For centuries, but it's unclear how long they stay there.
Yeah.
All we know is that they have a job of some sort, of some importance, and they're chosen when they try to commit suicide.
Yeah. There are these priests and nuns who at one point in their life attempted suicide and are chosen to
not only to renew their fate,
but to stand guard, to be a sentinel in this building. It's not clear yet in the paperwork why, but their assignment is to this building. And when Michael's looking through the paperwork, he sees that there is a manila folder with Allison's picture on it.
Because the people they're reformed, they become a whole completely different. They have a whole completely different name, but you can tell from the pictures they
have like a pre-Catholic life and then Catholic.
Being this guardian, and like we said, it spans like hundreds and hundreds of years.
It goes at the very least from photographs of these individuals to like cartoon drawing.
We were expecting it to go like further to like
figure,
caveman, Priest Unga Bunga protecting
this building.
Yeah, Michael discovers a folder with Allison's name, and that sees next. And we're seeing that the fact that she's, I don't know if her seeing ghosts had anything to do with it. We don't know that yet, but she sees that these barren, empty books that he finds in the vacant apartments of people that were supposed to be in there. It's all in Latin. Michael doesn't see it.
Yeah,
Michael. He has it translated, and it turns out that it's all quoting Paradise Lost.
Yeah, and all the information, all the detective work is leading that there's something
something's going on in this building with Allison, with the church that's being covered up.
And all this time, we're led to believe that the church is the villain,
doing something nefarious.
They're like, I don't understand what's happening. Like, I don't trust this one bit. Like,
I don't trust anyone.
You know, it's like you guys you're covering something up. And we learn that the person on watch is indeed a sentinel, and what they're a sentinel for is actually protecting
humanity,
the world. Yep. Because this building happens to be this building.
This one building.
This particular building.
For no reason.
On the location of a portal to hell.
Ta-da.
And all of these ghosts
are demons.
They are demons.
Or at least bad souls.
Who want to break free.
Yep. Michael discovers this because Allison she was at this party. Michael told her friends to watch over. They didn't. She fled back to the building for reasons I don't entirely understand why. And like he's going after her, or at least, not going after her, but this is before him trying to figure out what's happening, why this building. And he uncovers this boarded up plaque, and it's "Abandon hope all ye who enter."
From the Inferno.
Yep.
And so then we realize, this is a portal to hell.
Mm-hmm.
And all of these ghosts.
Burgess Meredith wants to break free.
He just wants out. And
they can't make me do Batman anymore.
Nope. Not for all the dimes in the world. The reason for the ghost appearances getting worse throughout the film is that like their strength is increasing
while the priest watching over, the current priest who's been in
dying.
There, he's old, he's decrepit,
he looks like a corpse.
He's like, his hair's, you could like see the layers of dust. And so Michael busts in like, "What are you doing?" Very weakly strangles the man because the actor's probably really old. Don't hurt the actor. So he's like, meh. And Michael gets clobbered on the back of the head by an unseen force. Then Allison shows up.
And then we realize that Allison is supposed to be the next Sentinel.
I mean, we already knew that.
Yeah. But like, it's like, it will.
We know that what she is supposed to do is guard the portal to hell.
But now she's aware of it.
Yep.
Like, we're on the same page with her.
So she enters the building and it becomes a spooky funland.
All of the bad things that you could possibly.
Michael shows up, and she's like, "Oh, thank God!" But it turns out,
no,
Michael's dead, and he's in hell. Why is he in hell? What happened?
Killed his wife.
He killed his wife. Another husband/boyfriend who we
Who's
think has
not
good
good.
intentions, who is bad.
Bad message out there. Don't get married.
Yeah, don't have a boyfriend.
Because he will probably kill you or give you the Antichrist.
So, him and all these other ghouls are trying to convince Allison to kill herself to avert the next Sentinel. And I have to say, I do not like this bit of the film. I do not like the scene. Because what the director did was he has all the regular, like, neighbor ghosts who are all murderers, but he uses people. He directly got them from hospitals and freak shows, and they have unfortunate deformities, skin deformities, facial deformities. It's very unpleasant that he's using these people as, like,
monstrosities.
Yeah, evil. I don't like that. I don't care for that at all. It's very important. It's very much in poor taste.
Yeah.
And I know apparently he was inspired by certain illustrations of Dante's Inferno and, like, descriptions, but don't do that. That's, like, the main drag of the film is I'm just going, oh, really?
Or at least at first I thought, like, oh, okay, just we're using a lot of makeup now.
I almost thought that at first, and some of them maybe.
And
but I don't think so.
Some definitely, like the main cast of ghosts are definitely, like, heavily makeup. But a lot of the people used in that scene are definitely.
It just leaves a bad taste in your mouth.
Yeah, it's unfortunate.
It's not like I don't want to talk about it because, like, this weird air of, like, almost dehumanizing people with deformities.
Yeah.
And handicapness, which we've gotten a lot better through the years. It's just that it's just, thinking about it is unpleasant because it's almost like they're being exploited. And it is dehumanizing them. And it just.
Yeah. You know, even with something like Freaks, they're characters, right? Like, they're, like, the story is about a carnival, and carnivals, you know, typically have. And
even that kind of exploits, but at least they have lines.
Yeah, like they're you know, they're acting, a person.
But for this film, they're just lumbering around. You can just see it up front, and it's just all cornering Allison. He's like, take the knife, kill yourself so we can be free. And she's like, okay. And then the power of Christ compels you. And the priest he was talking to at the church, and the old corpse priest, come to save the day. Religion saves the day.
Once again. And so Allison willingly accepts the role.
She didn't. You say willingly. It's going back to the themes of choice. She didn't have a choice.
Yeah.
The choice has been taken away from her.
Yeah. Because the Franchina reminds her that as someone who tried to take their own life, you have committed a mortal sin.
Yep.
And if you don't accept this role, you will be condemned to the same fate as everyone here. But if you decide to take the role, you will be back in God's grace.
That's all that matters, baby.
Yeah. And so she becomes
a nun?
Yeah. Saint Teresa, I think, is her new name.
Very on the nose.
Yeah.
And do a weird jump cut? Maybe.
I don't think the jump is as far as it seems based on her makeup. Like,
she does look older.
I think it's like what being a Sentinel just does
to you.
Yeah,
just
like it just drains you. Yeah, because
you have to hold back all of hell.
Yeah,
okay, that makes sense.
Yeah, very tiring. Because Ava Gardner, we see, is showing the apartment to Tom Berenger.
We have to point out that the old building was demolished and a new building. I guess, like the priest, though, the building was like decrepit.
Yeah.
What did they do with Allison when they were bulldozing?
Probably just worked around her.
But they knocked it down.
Yeah.
There's like, all right, we're gonna here. You put the cross down on the ground. Yeah. 5 minutes. Like, what are they?
I don't know.
Do they have to like
There's probably something like, union contract that says like what you can do when it comes to like building around the Sentinels and, gateways to hell. Mm-hmm. When we see Ava Gardner show Tom Berenger and his wife or girlfriend the new apartment, one of them asks if anyone lives there. And that's when Ava Gardner says, the only person that lives here is
an old blind
nun.
And then the camera pans to Allison. She's now Mother Teresa or Sister Teresa. And she's in the nun outfit. She's blind, ashy, chalky skin.
Yeah, she goes from being in her 20s to being in like her late 60s, like instantly.
And the movie ends, and very much how I thought of Rosemary's Baby, the ending of this film is very bleak.
Yeah.
Because, like I said, the choice is taken away from her, and she's no longer her. She's no longer a human being. She's a tool used to, of course, defend humanity, which, fair enough. You're saving the world, but
I'm sure she wanted to continue with her modeling career.
Right.
Yeah, it's amazing to see how these two films depict not just a woman's right to choice, but a woman's condition
and what her status is in society as something, as a human being to be taken seriously and to be listened to. And like Rosemary, Allison throughout the film is not.
Yeah,
it's always the people around her knows what's best.
Exactly, and they know it's best because they need a patriarchal need for her to
be subservient.
Serve a role.
Yeah.
That there's, whether it's literally for good or evil.
Or just to take care of a child.
Yeah. It's like Rosemary needs to be the mother of the Antichrist. Allison needs to be the guardian of the gate of hell.
Or a wife to someone. Yeah. She has to have titles. She just can't be her.
Yeah. Like the thing.
Rosemary just can't be her. She has to be a mother.
Precisely. They might have a choice at the end, but the path is not one that they wanted to be on.
Or was given the choice of, you could argue that Rosemary in a way, but more it was Guy manipulating her to have a baby, because she was interested in the beginning of the film and Guy was not, but then all of a sudden, a baby sounds like a good idea. Let's have a baby. So even then, even though she in the beginning
it's tarnished,
had a choice, she was thinking about having a baby, the choice was ultimately not hers, because it, like you said, it was tarnished and bastardized and destroyed to serve a higher purpose or to serve a role that she was not privy to decide on her own.
Exactly.
Very much as Allison was not given the choice of whether she wanted to be Sentinel.
I don't know, this sounds contrite to say, but like as life seems to teach you again and again, all intentions have unintended consequences. And the decisions that both of these women make and the ones that they don't make put them in a position at the end to have such a limited sense of freedom.
Choice, ability to just the ability to be a free-thinking person. I guess the message of the two films is you don't have a choice, and those are very, on whatever that may be, either it's getting married or having a child. As a man, especially more as a woman, no, you do have a choice. It's not up to one singular person or a group of people. It's up to ultimately you and what you want, because that's the most important thing.
Isn't it pretty to think so?
In a perfect world, maybe not in a Sentinel or Rosemary's Baby world, but in a perfect, still very much not show so much for this world either, but in a perfect world, yes.
Yeah, so for next week, we will be continuing with the theme of a person, not even somewhat, no, just a person being isolated, but like absolutely against their will. Like there's a whole bunch of just, it's not good.
Choices may have been made that brought these people to the situation, but at the end of the day, they don't deserve that.
Exactly.
So what are we going to talk about next week?
Psycho.
The earliest film, I think, we're doing.
So far.
1960.
Of course, the classic Psycho. And you're like, what can you possibly pair with Psycho? Like, What Goes Well with Psycho. Just an absolute gem of a movie called Butcher Baker Nightmare Maker.
I laugh every time.
It's one of the best titles
I think
of all
it's
time.
81.
Yeah.
Yep. So big gap.
Yeah, big gap. Lots of unhealthy
Incestual
relationships going on here. We'll be doing that. Bring your knives. Bring your moms.
Mom can watch, listen to.
Mom can watch. Auntie can watch.
Mm-hmm. Bring your $40,000 in a big bag.
Yeah. Unfortunately, we will not have title cards by Saul Bass, but
Cards are so cool.
It's not in the budget.
But we'll make sure we'll talk about that.
Yeah, we'll make do. So thank you very much for joining us. And make sure to say a prayer for all of those who may or may not be guarding the gates of hell.
Abandon hope, all you who enter here into the podcast.
See you later.